In a world of increasing mental health challenges, psychology and faith can both provide tools for healing and wellness. This is the idea behind Journey on My Mind. Each episode, our panel of pastors and therapists sit down together to share their experiences and insights on the modern world's mental health issues: depression, loneliness, aging, addiction, and so much more. Join us now as we explore what it means to thrive at the complex intersection of spirit and psychology.
Regular.
Hey, welcome to another Journey on My Mind. We're down a soul.
Yes.
Lauren, where art thou?
I'm not here.
I don't know. Yeah, oh, there she
She's
is.
got to get her priorities in there.
I knew she wasn't going to be able to be here. There was something come up at work.
Probably. There's always, with Lauren, like, her work schedule is not one that anyone would envy.
Yeah, right.
Very busy.
Yep. And we are very thankful. She gives us an hour
Yes.
every once in a while, so we're glad to have her. And so, but you get three guys.
Yeah, I think there's like a federal mandate to have all white men must have their own podcast. So we just banded together.
There it is.
Just simplify.
Yeah, we simplified.
3 in 1.
Yeah, that's just
hilarious.
That's just sad.
Yeah.
But it is life. Sometimes you just get what you get.
Yeah.
But
Forrest Gump over there?
no, that's a box of chocolates.
Oh, fuck, that's right.
Yeah. So life's a box of chocolates. But how are you, Dave?
I'm good.
Yeah?
Yeah, I'm going to New York tomorrow.
Oh,
Every
don't
year
fly to
or
Newark, whatever
No,
you do
we
right now.
will not. Every year or so, we do a hit and run New York where we fly in Friday afternoon. We see a show that night.
Oh.
We see a matinee Saturday. We see a show Saturday night. We fly out Sunday.
Wow. Okay,
That
that's
is like
that's
Crash
hitting
New
and
York
running.
City.
Where do you stay?
I'm not going to say because all the stalkers. No, different
This
places.
will post long after you being there.
The Millennium Times Square.
Oh, yes, I've
nice,
heard that
man.
is nice.
That's cool.
It's not like way nice, but
No.
it's
cool, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, the last time we
Oh.
were in New York, we stayed in a different place, and let's just say this room would be about 3 times the size of the room. We
Yeah,
were in.
yeah.
You know,
Okay,
it's
right.
like you have to
Yeah.
kind of shuffle
were-
sideways
yeah,
to get around
it's
the
like a
bed.
cruise ship.
Yeah,
When we went to
it was a cruise ship.
When we went to San Francisco, we stayed in a hotel room that was like all right, you go through, then I'll go through,
Yeah.
and then
Postage stamp.
Yep.
Yep.
In the bathroom, there's enough room to turn around. That was about it.
That's hilarious.
It was tiny and it was
I'd say
expensive.
$1,000 a night. Yeah.
But I get it. Sam, how are you?
Good. Just
Going to New York tomorrow?
No, I'm not going
No,
to New York.
no.
No, I'm just similar. Just, life's going, and there's a lot happening right now.
Yes.
So,
Yes. He's going to be a grandpa.
I'm going to be a grandpa.
Congratulations.
Yeah. So this is coming out late after Journey and Haley announced. So they're going to be talking about, actually, today. They're going to, which will be in the future. No, but
Okay.
it's great. This is perfect.
Well, congrats.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're excited about that.
That's awesome.
Getting ready. Yeah.
Do they know what they're having?
A little girl.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
Little girl. So
Okay.
it's wild. Wild.
Grandpa Sammy.
Oh, Peepaw. That's going to be my
Peepaw.
name. Peepaw. That's what I want him called.
That's
Peepaw.
rough, man. That is rough.
Peepaw.
You don't look like a peepaw.
I don't.
I go by Papa. So,
Yeah, Papa. That's a good one.
yeah, Papa.
Yeah.
So, anyway, so we are going to, that's just what's going on in our lives
it's
right
life.
now.
Welcome.
But we wanted to continue our conversation around church conflict.
Yeah.
And because we kind of got into it and then we ran out of time the last time. And so where do you want to pick this up, Dave?
Well, I'll just recap a little bit. And
Yeah.
then
Oh,
we-
okay.
That's good.
Then we'll move it forward. So we talked about the fact that church conflict is not only frequent but almost inevitable,
Yeah.
and that it's not always bad, but that churches, it's very, very hard to be in a church community without experiencing some degree of conflict.
Right.
And some of it's, we didn't say too much about this. Some conflict is just necessary and important, and then some conflict is just mind-numbingly crazy making and
Ridiculous.
all that ridiculous. And
Yeah.
has, and then we detailed the reasons why there's church conflict, and we hit like 6 reasons that if people change things, then people lose their minds. Personality clashes, power struggles, poor communication internally, theological disagreements,
Yeah.
and moral failures and perceived hypocrisy.
Yeah.
Those are some of the in surveys. Those are the biggies, like top 6.
Those are the highlights.
Yeah. So what we didn't get a chance to talk about is moving this forward in something that would be more constructive. Like we detailed what conflict looks like, where it comes from, but moving it forward. So that's where I think we pick up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
That's good.
I would love to ask both of you to start with, has there been an experience that you can share where there's been conflict within a church community that you felt like was resolved well? Can you think of a time when there was some kind of conflict among, someone who's a part of the community and pastoral staff, or within the pastoral staff, or among just people in the church that you can think of as like, I feel like that we really went to it directly and it got resolved well.
Okay.
And it has to be something you could feel like you could publicly share.
I'm trying to think through some of that.
Isn't that interesting that it's hard to think about?
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's see. That it got resolved.
The remainder of the podcast will be
us thinking through.
Will be Kevin going, let's see here.
Well, let's see. Well is the
we got some parameters on this question.
Yeah, and it's a good question.
It is,
because I think what is telling is it's hard to come up with.
I think I've experienced that a lot in small things.
Yeah,
but I don't know that we're necessarily talking about that, right? I mean, I think we
it can be
conflict.
it can be
all right,
smaller, it can be bigger.
We early on in my ministry, I've been a pastor for 35 years, so this one goes way back. We were trying to introduce drums.
Oh no.
Yeah, into
Edwin
into the worship service, and so the church I was pastoring at also had an evening service, and so there was a large segment of the church that would have said that would have been heretical. They went theological.
Edwin's nodding like yes.
They kind of went after the whole theology thing of it.
Wow.
Which has no merit.
Right.
And so we decided as a group, we got them all together in a room. And I said, let's just hear it. Let's just air your grievances about the idea of having drums in a worship service.
Yeah.
Why do we need it? Well, we don't need it. But we also don't need an organ, and we also don't need a piano. We also don't need a guitar. Yeah, we do. No, see, you got to have it one way or the other. Either we're gonna either. And so I started to just have a dialogue with them about the the lack of merit of their argument. But this conflict was not rooted in merit, and it was not rooted in truth. It was rooted in preference,
right?
Which I would argue, most conflicts that I've encountered, like on this level, are usually in preference. Not always. Sometimes there's a right and wrong in it. And so what we ended up doing was we said, we're going to try this once a month. And we're going to have a drummer and an electric guitar, and we're going to put a band up here.
Wow.
And
getting wild.
And so then they started to threaten me.
Okay.
So the threat was, well, we won't come.
Oh.
And we're not going to be a part of this. And da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
And I said, well, what if we do half the songs with the band and half the songs with organ and piano?
Yeah.
Well, that doesn't seem right. I said, well, let's try it.
Yeah.
Let's just do that. Rather than take a whole Sunday and put a band up there and a whole... So we did half and half.
Yeah.
Hybrid.
It was a compromise. And everybody was mad. Because the people that wanted the band were mad, and the people that wanted just the organ, everybody was mad.
Yeah.
And so I said, after the gathering, I said, all right, we're all going to gather. We're going to talk about what happened today. So we all gather let's hear it. Just tell me what you did.
I bet you heard it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, you heard it.
I heard it on the way to my car that day. Yeah. And so eventually what ended up happening was, the resolve was, how about we take Sunday night and make it special for the people who come on Sunday night. And the people who came on Sunday night were the organ and piano people. And we did that up big.
Yeah.
And they were really happy.
Yeah.
And then on Sunday mornings, we did a hybrid of a thing where we tried to include some songs. Eventually, what it ended up doing was pushing the organ out. Piano always was a part of it. And
so did it
nobody left.
Did it move it to so was it like a contemporary and then a traditional service? Is that ultimately what it meant,
yeah,
kinda?
I guess you could say that, but it was different. Like the Sunday night service was a different thing.
But getting there, like
yeah. So we ended up doing it, and it worked out.
Yeah.
Most of the people didn't leave. I can think of one person that just cussed me out and left, which I said,
Probably,
there you go. Yeah, that's fine.
It was fun.
I've been cussed out before.
Yeah.
And had people leave, but for the most part, it ended okay.
Yeah.
It ended okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I don't know if that's a good one or not.
Well, it's a mixed bag.
It is a
we'll
mixed
come
bag.
back to it.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I think of a lot of times like resolution in conflict, and so much of what I deal with in my world is kind of interpersonal,
For sure.
right? And so, which obviously not going to dive into that, but when relationships have been, when there's been healing in relationships. So I see this a lot on a micro, maybe more in where I sit. So the bigger things, I think Kevin and Suze and stuff, right? But some of
They usually roll to my door.
yeah, relational things.
Yeah. Yeah, right. I think it's interesting, and I didn't know I was going to hear, but I think it's interesting that it was a struggle to come up with examples, and that even
that kind of turned out okay.
And even the example, and I'll go back to yours, is a little like rough in terms of, like, it got resolved well.
It did, yeah.
But it didn't really address the heart of the fact that people, right?
You found a solution.
Yeah, it was like a pragmatic solution.
Yeah.
Right.
It was solved.
Yeah.
On the pragmatic level. But
It was compromise is the worst kind of resolution
sometimes
in my perspective, because everybody's got to give a little. Everybody's got to, nobody wins.
Everybody loses in some
Yeah,
sense.
in some respects, that's what happened in this. So it was a compromise. It wasn't a collaboration. It wasn't like, hey, I'm in on this. I'm fully in on this. Nobody was ever fully in on a drum set in there other than the young people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just interesting that you guys were like, all right, we're going to make a good faith effort to work this out.
Yeah.
And then we come to this point and everybody's mad.
Yeah.
You know?
No,
Very
everybody.
Everybody.
Like everybody was mad.
Yeah. So I bet you could come up with dozens of other examples that clearly didn't go well. Didn't even get to it. So I think that's my first question to you all is, why is this the case? Like, why do you think, particularly, and I don't think it's only churches, but particularly in churches where conflict how many stories have you heard from people in churches everywhere that's like things blew up because of some dumb thing, personality conflict, theological dispute? It just seems very inherent to. Why do you
where
think?
church plants come from, or splits. Depends
splits.
on what you want to call them.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you have a thought about why is this such a difficult thing for churches?
Yeah, because they attach their theology to it. They attach something that is bigger than a preference. They attach to them, like with the music thing, they really did think it was an abomination to God.
Spiritual issue.
So, or there's no room for compromise when everything is black and white. There's no room to meet in the middle, because what I believe is true. So if what I believe is true, then you have to believe what I believe in order for this to work. And so you have to come to my side. There's no means by which, and for church people, for people that have been raised and told all along that this is the truth, when you come up again, and that could be the color of the pews, could be the truth, or the carpet, or whether somebody is, I got into a pretty big conflict between whether or not somebody should be christened when they're born, whether they should be baptized or dedicated as children, babies. My answer was, what do you want? I can do all of those, because they all mean to me basically the same thing. But if you grow up in a tradition of christening, Lutheran, Or if you grow up in baptism, that would be Presbyterian. Or if you grew up in Baptist, is dedication. That's gospel. And once you put gospel to it, like
you attach more importance to that thing.
How do I compromise? I can't compromise this. Lori and I, when our first child was born back in 1990, her dad, staunch Lutheran, came to our house, met our son, and said, "Is he christened yet?" And Lori said, "We're not going to get him christened." Well,
lost his mind.
That was bad.
Oh, wasn't bad.
Yeah.
It was like, what happens if he dies?
Yeah.
What do you mean, what happens if he dies? I literally asked that question. Well, he'll go to hell if he's not christened. I said, who told you that? Well, now I'm into my theology bag, but I'm also into this, and he's convinced. And he prayed for our son until he got to the age of whatever.
Accountability.
Because he was really, truly afraid.
Yeah. Wow.
So we never did get him christened, but I toyed with
no
just
compromise.
saying, we did it. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
But there was no, I think it's rooted in something like that.
Attaching more importance on things that we might call like sacred cows that stick around and there's not necessarily
it's more than that.
Yeah.
This is somebody told him that.
Well,
somebody told him that was true.
Yes. Well, in a similar, with baptism in Church of Christ and that those things were planted, even though I wasn't a baby, in a way that shaped how I lived, in a lot of fear and shame. So it created a lot of those things in me.
Yeah.
Just that poor theology in that sense.
Right.
Also too, I don't know if there's something to do with kind of to your question about, we just have so much choice here. There's no need, we don't have to be committed. And we're in a culture where it's so easy just to unfriend or unfollow or jump,
just walk away.
Yes. We've created a system where walking away is the easiest thing and there's not much repercussion when you do. You just,
if any.
Yeah.
Other than you just lose relationship. But
so I don't know if that has anything to do with at least
no, I think
what I experienced.
Makes sense. I asked the pastor of a church that I went to for 20 some years in Charlotte, the lead pastor. I said, "What's been the hardest part of your job over these years?" And he said, "The consumer mindset."
It is
that
hard.
People just look at church as a commodity, and if you're not meeting their needs, then they complain and leave.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I heard Francis Chan at a conference one time talking about this, and he was doing I think it was the church in China he was involved with, and he was kind of highlighting the idea that here we don't like something, the color of the carpet, we go, but in a place where that community is illegal or it is actually you have to be committed and dedicated to this thing. It's a
right.
That you don't see people leaving those communities. It's life or death, in so many ways. So
right. But I also think churches have conflict styles, actually. The first church I was in, it was very competing. It was a competing,
within the pastoral staff, the pastoral staff
as a
the organism itself.
The organization itself had a feel of competition with other churches. Within itself. And very combative.
Yeah.
So it had this
us against
because it was
them.
the nature of the senior pastor.
Right.
He was right, everybody else was wrong, and so
that DNA trickled into the whole.
Oh man, it was very combative, very much so. This is the way, and it was the last. He's extraordinarily a stubborn church, really stubborn to change. That was the church where we were trying to do the drum thing.
Oh right,
yeah,
right. So it was just really stubborn. The next church I went to, guy was laissez-faire leader. He was very, I would say, fearful of conflict, and so very accommodating. Oh, you can do that, and you can do. I don't want to fight with you. And I was like, wow, this is whiplash.
Did that guy ever have a day off, or was he always doing something for somebody?
But it was just it felt.
Yeah.
It had a totally different feel for it, but there was no no accountability in that environment.
But
There
did
was
you
no-
expect it to be spinning
I
your wheels
did.
all the time too?
Yeah. It was just
Accommodating
But they
everyone.
have a different flavor or feel when it came to conflict. Like somebody would bring like an emotionally charged conflict up against the leadership of the church, and they'd be very accommodating. And I'd be like, I think they're wrong, but I guess we're going to accommodate them.
That's interesting.
So I don't know
I hadn't thought about that.
how that plays in.
It does.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just like you said, they're different styles that
yeah.
are part of the culture,
Right.
and then that affects how
Right.
conflict gets addressed or not addressed, or
Right.
all of it.
And what was interesting was in the church that accommodated most of the time, they tried to come up with a white paper for every possible conflict.
Wow.
And we had this wall. I took a pic. I don't have it anymore, but there was a picture. If you could imagine a wall in a hallway, 10 feet up, about at least 20 feet, that was covered in positions on everything from the Freemasons to
Like how you had to believe about this and this and this.
spiritual gifts. And
Wow.
so they had.
Where's my Freemason
Yeah.
position
No,
statement?
there really was that stuff. Yeah.
it was like, wow. And I got to write a couple of those because they were like, hey, you know about this, why don't you write this one? And I'm like, sure. So I hope they're gone.
It's
I
like a
hope they built-
business with the policy manual, you know,
Right.
like a big
Yeah, the policy manual at that church
on the wall.
was a 3-ring binder. It was this thick. It was at least 6 inches thick. It was a 3-inch binder, but it was like,
Yeah.
it was crazy.
Yeah.
But that's how they manage conflict. Oh, we have a policy
An
for
answer
that.
for every
That's
policy.
it. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Interesting. Well, I'm gonna
Dave's like, I won't go to that church.
believe me, we've had all the variations. So. I'm going to say back a little bit of what you all said in different words. Though,
Okay.
Okay.
Because
Psychology
it was,
words.
No,
Clearly.
it was well said, but I want to say it in some words that we've talked about here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we've talked about on Sundays and also on podcasts is the idea of centered set versus bounded set.
Right.
And the idea, just to kind of, and I'm saying this, but it's really a question back to you, is that most of us have grown up in this bounded set idea of church, which is there's this fence around and there's in and out.
Correct.
And so that what happens when you have organizations that are bounded like that, right? It's like you're either in it or you're not in it. Is that within that it starts tightening up. So what you're saying is that a lot of it comes down to people are saying, no, this is in and that's out, and this is in and it gets tighter and tighter and tighter,
Correct.
right?
Yep.
And so as opposed to a centered set, which is we're trying to bring people toward a common person and mission and so on.
Yeah.
But part of the reason, I mean, what we're trying to wrestle with is why does conflict get so dug in and hard to resolve in the church? And one is that it comes from that bounded set mentality, which is, well, that's out of bounds.
In or out.
Drums, I mean, that's insane.
That's true. That's a great
That you would
example.
do, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, how would you ever think that we
How
could
could
have,
you worship to drums?
right in this corral that we're in right now?
Yep.
Right. And other people within that, people are having their own sort of bounded sets, like subsets of subsets.
Yes.
In that.
Oh, for
That's
sure.
interesting.
Oh, it is.
Okay.
Yep.
The other we mentioned is the consumer mindset that is very American culture, which is church is a commodity. It offers programs and services that meet my need.
Right.
Correct.
And if it meets my need, I stay. And if it doesn't, then I get mad and I leave.
Yeah,
Right.
it exists for my purposes.
Right.
Yes.
And that's a completely, kind of 20th century American notion.
For sure.
Yeah.
And then related to that is, I think part of it is having this individualistic culture, which is what you were saying is like in other places that are more collectivist cultures and where the stakes are higher about leaving or going, it's people stay because it's about the larger organism. Whereas individualistic, it's like, oh, I don't like what they did with that worship set. I don't like. I may have heard that this week. Somebody say, oh, I like this, but I don't like that. I like it. It's a lot of that kind of like going to preference, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So here's the tricky part. How do we break through that in churches, because in psychology, like for example, I saw a band earlier today, and what we try to get to is what's the real issue here,
Yeah.
right? What's the real thing?
Yeah.
Like it blew up around this thing, but there's a deeper thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
What is the deeper thing?
Right.
But it feels like what you were trying to do that,
Yeah.
but when things can always be addressed or dressed up in theological
Yeah.
language, and you're like, how do you get past that and go, let's use the drum thing since it's such a specific thing. I mean, obviously the deeper thing is I don't feel comfortable and I don't like having drums in this setting.
Right.
That's the thing. But then we reverse engineer it and go, theologically, here's the
Right.
basis for that. We
Yeah.
do this all the time.
Right. Rather than allow the theology to inform.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So so when it comes to conflict, then we're operating out of this place of like, it's this thing, but it's really this thing that we can't get to. Any thoughts about that?
When dealing with Mike's, this is just purely, I'm not sure if this works or not.
Okay.
Okay. It has worked for me in the past. Is I've worked towards incremental change.
Okay.
So the idea of the drums I didn't handle as well as I could have. I could have
learned.
I
You
learned.
learned.
I did.
Yeah.
Well, right.
So another one was we had to I had to discontinue a choir.
No.
Okay.
Similar.
Yeah. What is it with music people? But anyway,
Yeah. What is it with music people?
I'm gonna be quiet.
and so I was like, and I learned from the drum thing. Okay. Well, I'm not saying, so I got the choir together. It was, and part of it was, it had played itself out. It was dwindling. It was, and so I didn't even bring up discontinuing. I didn't bring up stopping it. I just got them together and I said, hey, let's pray about this ministry and how it could be more effective. And let's see if we can do a few changes just to bring about some things. So, but I'm open to hearing what you guys think of that. So I brought them into the dilemma in a non-threatening way, where I didn't say, if we don't fix this, we're going to can it, which
Right.
is what I would have done when I was younger.
Yeah.
So then so I get a few ideas and I said, let's try these. Let's try a few of these. But because we're going to try some new things, let's break this up and let's have the choir, rather than every week, let's go to every other week. Okay, yeah, that gives us time to practice these new things. Great. And so we went to every other week. And the new things, a couple of them worked, a couple of them didn't. And I said, well, let's try this for a couple months. So I froze it for a couple months per se. So I said, and then I got more feedback from people in the church, from the choir. And so the choir then comes back and says, oh, I got some other ideas. Let's try this, this, and this. And I said, okay, but that's going to take a little more work. So let's go to once a month, rather than twice a week. And so we froze it at once a month for 6 months. And what ended up happening was the core group of people came to the conclusion, this just doesn't work anymore. And so rather than it becoming a conflict, it was a working through a process that allowed people to at least wrestle with it over a period of time, rather than interjecting, okay, and so we put a bow on it. And I said, you know what, we could bring it back next summer for a Renaissance, or we could do this or do that. And I became a person that was like, you want to try this? You want to try that? Rather than, let's put a bullet in this sucker, which is really what I was trying to do, honestly.
But the approach, I think, Kev, like that's what's, because this is one of the things I've really been learning, and I've talked about all the time these last few years, is instead of just kind of the judgment of it, you standing in that, you got curious with them and said, hey, well, is there things we can do here?
And I don't like choir music. I just don't.
But I think that, maybe even in the way you approach that, sometimes maybe we start conflict by the way we approach something in that way or whatever.
So there's a relational context.
Yes.
Yeah.
And a curiosity.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I actually went back to them the next summer and said, hey, did you guys want to do a couple Sundays this summer? What are you thinking?
Yeah.
Oh, no, we moved on.
Yeah.
And there was what should have been a big conflict.
Right. But people were brought into relationship around it.
That's right.
Right. It was,
and they had participation in it.
And they had participation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rather than just say, "Hey, we're gonna have drums on Sunday. Get over it."
Yeah.
Well, you invited him into like, hey, invited him into a place where engaging even a different part. You moved him out of like the lane.
So
of,
it was more avoiding conflict,
Right.
than it was a conflict, because it never escalated.
But I think that's a good example of some, I'll say, principles of things that are important of relational context, curiosity, involving people to have a voice, things like that.
Yeah.
Where I am really, and I don't have a resolution. That's why I keep pushing.
Okay,
Yeah, that's
keep
good.
pushing it.
Is that I think part of the struggle with conflict in the church is the things we were talking about before, which are how committed people are to their own opinion, self-interest, agenda, rightness, and so on, that can then get spiritualized.
Right.
Yes.
And it's very hard to kind of move past that. I mean, if I actually think if we go to a very macro level, if we wanted to solve the shenanigans that are going on in our country, if we all had a commitment to lay down our own self-interest, that's if you think about it on that level, it's like, this is just tribalism. This is pure like fighting for my own rights, for this, and I'm part of this group, and we need to. It's tribalism. I know that's not going to happen, but that the path forward with that is that people lay down their own self-interest.
Right.
So if you think, well, the church is the should be pointing the way, should be a way to live into this time in a way that's different.
Yeah.
Then how do we bust through that? That's the part that is the dilemma, is when it gets to be not only a reflection of the culture, which it is, but also has this other layer of, but I'm so right.
Yeah.
And I should, like, I'm defending the plans and purposes of God, not just just not opposed to drums.
Next level on it. Yeah.
Right. It's the next leveling part that feels like becomes even harder, because it's hard enough culturally outside of a church context. You bring it in here, and it makes sense that where we started this conversation was like, has there been a good example of it? And we're all like, let's think about it.
I think it's the identification of the instigators or ringleaders within the organization that oppose something or are steeped into something that is in conflict with the church in a certain way. If somebody, the idea being, I could just use this as an example, it probably is not a great one, but let's just say it is. Let's say that somebody's political views reaches to the point of where it matches their is justified by their theological views. Okay.
Not that that's happened.
But the inverse would be their theology informs their politics, and
the way it should operate, but doesn't.
But let's just say then, there's a agitation with our church if we don't take a position. If we don't, like, what's wrong with you people? And then they start to agitate within the church and say, we need this church to take a position on, you pick whatever you want. Whatever side you want, because we don't take any positions. And it behooves us, I like that word, to talk with the people that are being instigated or stirred up in such a way that we can have a conversation that it invites them into rethinking the inverse. And if they can't let their theology inform their politics and coexist with a bunch of people who disagree with them, odds are they can't stay. Because we choose to be curious enough as a church to say, we would love a lot of Democrats and Republicans sitting at the same table together to have a conversation around, even if it's politics, but how that then puts a face to a different position, how you might not be right. There might be nuances to this. It might not be as clean as we thought it was. And we've raised that to a high level as a church because we have the whole spectrum
Wow.
here.
Yep.
Independents, libertarians, Republicans, Democrats, it doesn't matter to us what you are. What matters to us is when you start to impose that upon the whole or on others. You have to believe like me in order to be a Christian. Not true. And so the conflict then comes when the imposition, when imposing my beliefs on you becomes my goal. And so the conversation is had. I think you break through it by putting a face to someone who thinks differently and have a relationship with that person who believes different than you do. And then you can at least go, all right, I can have empathy for that, or I can be curious about that, or I can at least be in relationship with somebody who normally I would like to just argue with. I don't know, but that's been the challenge of this church, I think, is to move us in a direction that allows people to say, you know what, I could be wrong on this.
Yeah.
And if you can't be, I think you struggle here.
That's good stuff there. Other thoughts?
I mean, yeah. I just, the relationship piece is so key. Like, because when it's just an idea, like I can battle any idea, but when there's a human attached to that idea, for me, I mean, as an empath, living in this world right now is hard.
It is hard
because I don't experience empathy from, I do, but I mean, it feels fewer and far between maybe than it's ever felt. And so, so for me, I agree. I think relationship is where it was always my starting point, and then curiosity.
Right, both.
Yeah, both.
As you guys are talking, it makes me some things kind of are pulling together in my head.
Oh, good.
And I don't, not that it's a solve, but it's I'll tell you where my mind goes.
Okay.
It feels like rather than a white paper on every single thing that needs to plaster the board, we need a white paper. Not really, but the idea of how we think about conflict on the deepest level, not on the Matthew 18, go to the person and have this conversation and that doesn't go, all that's usually historically when we think about conflict in the church, it's very, and not that stuff's bad, but it's like, do this process or do this thing or have this, whatever. I'm really talking about like a posture of, being humble, of being open and curious, of putting the needs of the body over the needs of the one, of being willing to be wrong, to be all those kinds of things, of like almost whether that's a theology or just sort of because all that's floating here.
Oh, for sure.
It's almost like it needs to be pulled together in a way that's like, this is really how we want to talk about, teach, disciple around the whole idea of conflict.
It's hard to do.
All right.
Thanks, Dave.
Man.
Thanks, Sam.
Dave. Yeah.
You guys have a great week. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.
See you, bud.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Journey on My Mind. If you enjoyed it, please help us spread the word by leaving us a review and sharing it on your social media. Journey on My Mind is a production of Journey Church in Brentwood, Tennessee. Edwin Rivera III is the show's producer with technical assistance from Randy Hansen. Grant Opperman edits the show. If you have a suggestion for a future topic or a question, you can text us at 615-861-9503. And if you would like to talk to someone about spiritual or mental health issues, you can email our care pastor, Sam Barnhart, at sam@journeytn.com.